was 27 when I moved into that shoebox of an apartment above an old restaurant in Atlanta. Rent was suspiciously cheap, and the landlord gave me the sales pitch about historic charm. What he really meant was it smelled like fryer oil no matter how many candles I lit, and every surface creaked like it was held together with tape. But I was bartending then, barely scraping by, and when you're living tip to tip, you don't argue with $500 a month. I finish my shifts at 2 a.m., snag a leftover burger on the way home, and drag myself up the narrow staircase that led to my apartment. I'd kick off my shoes, crack a beer, and put something dumb on the TV until I could sleep. The walls shook when the freight trains rolled through, and the floorboards vibrated when trucks hit potholes outside. I got used to noise. So when I first heard the scraping, I thought nothing of it. Just rats. The building was old, and the restaurant downstairs had been closed for years. God knows what lived in those walls. It sounded like claws dragging across the underside of the floorboards, maybe even something chewing. I laughed about it to a coworker the next day. "Guess I got new roommates," I said. But the noise kept happening, every night around the same time. Scraping, dragging, then silence. Once I swore I heard the flick of a lighter. A week later, after another shift, I dropped onto the couch, cracked a beer, and set my plate of fries on the table. Then I heard it again, right beneath where I sat. I stomped the floor with my heel like an idiot, hoping to scare off whatever was down there. The sound stopped. I thought it had worked, until I went to the kitchen for ketchup and noticed one of the floorboards near the fridge was slightly lifted, like someone had pried it up and set it back. I crouched down, ran my hand across it, and felt fresh scrape marks along the edge. The wood dust was too clean to be old. That night, every time a truck passed outside, I thought it was something moving under me. The next day, curiosity tugged at me all day, and by nightfall, I couldn't help myself. I had to see for myself. I wedged a screwdriver under that loose board and pried it up. What I saw wasn't rat droppings or old wiring. It was cigarette butts, fresh ones. A couple of crumbs. Looked like bread or crackers. Someone had been sitting under my damn floor, smoking and eating. In case you're wondering, I smoke too, so I couldn't smell it over the smell of my own cigarettes. My stomach turned when I realized the butts were still stained with yellow, like they hadn't been there long. And when I looked closer, something down there was lit. The restaurant's kitchen. It was supposed to be dark, locked, abandoned. But I could see a soft glow, and it was glinting off the stainless steel like someone was walking through with a flashlight. I slammed the board back down, shoved my fridge against it, and sat there with my phone in my hand for 20 minutes, trying to figure out what the hell to do. The next day, I asked the landlord if anyone was supposed to be in the restaurant. He said, "Nah, place is shut tight. Probably your imagination. Rats chew wires, lights flicker. You know how it is." He grinned like I just told him a joke. I knew I wasn't imagining it. When I got home that night, 2 more boards looked like they'd been lifted and reset. That's when I started noticing little things out of place in my apartment, too. A fork missing from the drawer. My lighter moved from the counter to the windowsill. Nothing stolen, nothing big, just enough to let me know someone had been up here when I was gone. I decided I needed proof. Bought a cheap motion detect camera off Amazon, battery powered, and set it up to face the gap in the floor near the fridge. First night, nothing but static. Second night, camera triggered at 2:24 a.m. I pulled up the file the next morning, excited and terrified. But the footage there was nothing. Just a low sound of scraping, then nothing. Third night, Success. The feed showed the kitchen, dim and grainy, and a figure circling the room in slow loops. Head down, hands in pockets, pacing like he was walking a track. My stomach flipped when I zoomed in. I stared at that footage for an hour, hoping I was wrong. But whoever was down there wasn't just some random squatter. He'd been in my apartment, digging through my stuff. That night, I parked my pickup at the side alley, facing the restaurant door. Around 2 a.m, I saw the glow again through the kitchen window. I grabbed my flashlight and crept to the side door. The padlock was still looped, but hanging loose. Not latched. I pushed the door open and stepped into the kitchen. Then there was a breath behind me. Just behind me. Or maybe it was the wind pushing through the vents. I spun around fast, with the light shaking in my hand. Nothing. Then came the slam. A door deeper in the restaurant banged shut. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hall, then silence. I bolted. Cops showed up 20 minutes later. They swept the place, found candy wrappers, more butts, a pile of cans in a corner. Squatters, they said. Could be anyone. I showed them the camera footage. One officer frowned. Looks like a trespasser, yeah. Probably homeless. We'll keep an eye on it. That was it. No follow-up, no arrests. I moved out a week later. Left half my stuff behind because I couldn't shake the thought of some guy pacing under my feet, listening to me eat, sleep, breathe. To this day, I won't rent a place above a business. Don't trust it. I've seen what lives in the cracks. I was living in Buffalo while grinding through my second year of nursing school. My apartment was one of those places you take because it's cheap and close to campus, not because you love it. Drafty old house, chopped up into 3 units. Mine was on the second floor. 1 bedroom, squeaky radiator, creaky doors, and just enough space to pile textbooks on every surface. You didn't thrive there. You adapted. One habit at a time. Every night, I'd grab an energy drink from the mini fridge, prop my laptop on the kitchen table, and stay up way too late, highlighting notes until the words blurred together. The glow of my screen was usually the only light in the place after midnight. The radiator hissed, the wind rattled the windows, and I'd have the noise of the fridge to remind me I wasn't completely alone in the silence. I wasn't the type to spook easy. Nursing school had already fried my nerves. Most nights I was too tired to care about noises. But then, one night, the attic fan came on. It was just after 3 a.m. I remember because I'd promised myself I'd quit studying by midnight, and like always, I blew right past it. I was hunched over pharmacology notes when I heard the whir start above me. The thing is, the attic fan was ancient. One of those noisy box units screwed into the roofline. The only way to turn it on was through a switch in my bedroom. My bedroom, behind a locked door. I sat there listening, at first thinking I was imagining it. Then it kicked off just as suddenly. Dead quiet again. I laughed it off. Great, now the wiring's haunted too. Old houses do weird things. I told myself that 3 times before I finally went to bed. The next night, it happened again, around the same time. I was scrolling notes on my laptop, and there it was. The fan groaning awake above me, spinning, vibrating faintly through the ceiling beams. This time I walked into my bedroom. The switch was still down, off. I flicked it up, then down again, just to be sure. The sound kept going. I stood there staring at the ceiling, clutching my phone like it would help. Eventually, it wound down and clicked off. I didn't sleep much that night. A couple days later, I was dragging trash to the curb when my downstairs neighbor, an older guy named Martin, asked, "Hey, your roommate's still running those trains up there?" I looked at him. "What?" "You know, model trains. I hear them sometimes. Little electric whir, clack, clack, like tracks." I just stared. "I don't have a roommate." He looked embarrassed, muttered something about old houses carrying sound funny, and shuffled back inside. The thing was, he wasn't wrong. I had heard a faint clacking up there the night before, layered under the fan noise. I'd chalked it up to pipes or maybe mice. Hearing him describe it made my whole body tense up. I tried to logic my way through it. Maybe the landlord wired the fan wrong. Maybe the switch wasn't connected right. Maybe Martin was mistaking my late-night typing for train sounds. One night, I stacked my heaviest textbooks against the hatch. It was stupid, I knew, but it made me feel like I had a barrier. It was close to finals week, and I was up again past midnight. The apartment was quiet. I didn't notice how quiet it was until the only thing I could hear was my typing. Then, out of nowhere, the attic fan kicked on. Not just the hum this time. Then came the clacking again, with a rhythm like wheels on a track. I froze. My first thought wasn't ghosts. It was someone was up there. Someone had been up there for days. I called my landlord. It was past midnight, but he picked up groggy. I told him flat out, "I think there's someone in the attic." He laughed. "Impossible. That attic's sealed. I've got the only key." "Then explain the fan," I snapped. Silence. Then he sighed and said he'd come by in the morning. He showed up with a key ring and a flashlight. I stood back while he popped the hatch. A rush of stale, warm air hit us and the smell of burnt food. He climbed up first, then cursed. Jesus. I followed enough to see over the edge. In the attic, a thin mattress rolled against the beams, a blanket, a hot plate still plugged into an extension cord. And beside it, a little plastic case with model train parts, wheels, track sections, wiring. Whoever had been there was gone. The landlord muttered about squatters, said maybe someone slipped in months ago. The police came, looked around and said, "Probably transient. He's gone now." Gone now. Like that was supposed to make me feel better. The fan never came on again, but I kept hearing it in my mind. And that clacking sound circling above me. My textbook stayed stacked by the hatch until the day my lease ended. I started studying at the library after that. Even now, years later, when I hear a fan kick on unexpectedly, I tense up. Mornings in my house are on autopilot. Coffee, cereal bowls lined up, spoons clinking, kids shuffling in still half asleep. Eli, 8, and Nora, 5, already know how it works. Weekdays aren't for cartoons, just cereal, brushing teeth, and out the door. We rent an old ranch house, the kind you convince yourself has character. One bathroom, no garage, but a yard with enough sun to grow tomatoes, and a fence that keeps the kids where I can see them. My landlord, Denise, lives in Ankeny and sends texts with too many exclamation points. "So glad you're in. You'll love the neighborhood." She gave me a folder at move-in with appliance manuals and a note that the previous tenant, Sharon, left it clean. That's all I knew about the house's past. A month in, it finally felt like ours. Shoes by the door, crayon art on the fridge, the dog's bed tucked under the window. You only learn the quirks of a house by living in it. How the front door sticks when it rains, which cabinet squeaks, the way the AC coughs before it runs. Little things you stop noticing once they become yours. One morning, something felt wrong. I had the kettle heating when I looked down the hall. At first, I couldn't tell why it felt off. Then I saw 3 muddy prints leading from the hall corner to outside the kid's bedroom. Big ones. Heel to toe. Crisp tread. Not the mess of kids tracking dirt. Not the stagger of a dog. Clean, careful steps. My kids were already at the table in socks. The dog hadn't moved from her bed. The doors were still locked, yet someone had walked the hall and stopped outside my kids' door. I didn't say anything to them. Just smiled and said, "Shoes, let's go." On the drive to school, I made small talk about music while my brain replayed those prints. Whoever left them had been inside minutes after walking on wet ground. When I got home, I photographed them and texted Denise, "Hey, weird thing. Muddy prints in the hall, kids asleep, doors locked. Ever had trouble with..." She replied fast, "Oh gosh, maybe a delivery person came by?" Which made no sense. I scrubbed the prints off the floor, but couldn't scrub away the fact that whoever left them hadn't made exit prints. They'd either wiped their shoes or had another way out. For a week, nothing happened. I almost convinced myself I'd overreacted. Then came the knock. It was mid-morning. A man stood on the porch, maybe late 50s, cap pulled low, faded t-shirt. He smiled like he was about to ask for directions. "Hey there," he said. "Sharon home?" I told him no one by that name lived here. "You sure?" he asked. "We knew each other. I used to stay here sometimes." I didn't open the door. Sharon's gone. He gave me a smile that felt cold somehow. "That's too bad." Instead of leaving, he lingered, looked toward the driveway, tested the porch railing with his hand, then drifted toward the side yard, like he was measuring the house. I closed the door and locked it, and even then, I wasn't sure I was safe. Minutes later, from the kitchen window, I saw him by the fence gate. He tested the latch like it was his own door. Then he looked at the meter box before finally walking away. I called non-emergency police. An officer came by, listened, and walked the yard with me. At the meter box, he reached under the lip and pulled out a small, dull spare key. "You didn't know this was here?" he asked. I shook my head. "Previous tenants probably left it," he said. "Or someone else knew." That cold, sick feeling crept in fast. That man had gone straight to the spot. That night, I double-checked every lock, moved the dog's bed into the hallway, and put a bat by the bedroom door. I kept looking down the hall where those prints had been. 3 nights later, the doorbell rang at 3:30 a.m. I didn't answer. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes you listen harder. The same man came back in daylight a week later. Same cap, same shirt. "Tell Sharon I stopped by," he said through the door. Then he leaned close and smiled. I called the police again. The officer shrugged. "We'll canvass, but we can't post a car here." Denise had the locks changed that day, swearing she had no idea about the key. I needed a break, so I sent the kids to their dad's for the weekend and stayed with my sister. But when I came back, I knew the rhythm of the house had changed for good. Months later, I spotted him at the grocery store, 2 aisles away, reading the back of a cereal box. He didn't look at me, but I felt it anyway. He set the box down and left without buying anything. He never came back. Or maybe he did, and the cameras scared him off. But I know this. The scariest part wasn't the muddy prints or the knock. It was realizing the house had a secret I never knew to ask about. A key under the meter. A detail passed from one tenant to another. A detail that man already knew. I've always worked best at night. Most people hate the quiet hours when the rest of the city is asleep. But for me, that's when my brain feels clearest. I'm a freelance tech writer, so my house in Phoenix doubles as my office. By the time the sun sets, the desert air cools just enough to make the AC bearable, and I sit down at my desk with nothing but electronics to keep me company. My smart home setup was part of the job and part of my lifestyle. I tested apps, wrote reviews, explained how to stay safe online. Ironically, I thought I was more careful than most. That's why the first ping on my phone that night caught me so off guard. It read, "Your lock has been reset to factory settings." At first, I assumed it was a bug. Smart locks aren't perfect, and I'd written before about glitches that sent owners into a panic for no reason. But then I noticed the timestamp. The reset had happened just a few seconds before the notification came through. I hadn't touched the lock. I hadn't even gotten up from my desk. I pulled up the device log, expecting to see a system error or maybe a failed connection. Instead, there it was, in black and white, an attempted login from an IP address that geolocated to less than 300 feet from my house. I remember staring at that number as if my brain was trying to find another explanation. 300 feet. That wasn't someone hacking in from Russia or some anonymous bot trying random passwords. That was someone outside, close enough to be on my street. I went straight to the door and checked the deadbolt manually, even though the app was telling me the lock had been reset. My hands hovered over the metal, and for the first time I wondered if someone was on the other side listening. I spent the next hour telling myself it was just a system glitch. I typed up half a paragraph about it in my notes, thinking I might turn it into an article later. But I couldn't focus on anything else. Every sound seemed magnified. The AC compressor kicking on, the tick of the router fan, even the buzz of my monitor when the screen dimmed. Then came the vibration. It was subtle, like the faint rattle you hear when a heavy truck passes by. Except it wasn't the house. It was the front door. Not moving, barely breathing, I waited. The sound wasn't my imagination. Not this time. A soft tremor, like someone testing the handle from the outside. The worst part was how faint it was, as if whoever was out there didn't want me to hear. I grabbed my phone and called the smart lock's support line. While I was explaining what happened to the woman on the other end, I kept my eyes locked on the door. The vibration came again. Just once, and I swear I could almost feel it through the floorboards. The support rep asked me to check the device logs again, and as I did, I noticed another attempt had been made. This time only a minute earlier. "That means someone is physically trying to access the system," she said carefully. I could hear her typing fast. That was all I needed to hear. I hung up and dialed 911. By the time the police arrived, the sounds had stopped. The officers swept the outside of the house with flashlights, checked the door, even looked around the yard. Nothing. They told me it was probably just a hacking attempt. And for the vibration I heard, "You sure it wasn't just the wind?" one of them asked. But it wasn't. I knew what I'd heard. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of my yard myself. That's when I found soft boot prints in the dust near the front steps. The desert ground doesn't hold impressions well, but these were fresh enough to be clear. Someone had been standing there. I called the police again and they logged it, but I could tell they weren't taking it seriously. "Could be delivery," one of them said. "Could be neighbor kids." But I knew better. Whoever it was hadn't just stood there. They'd been close enough to mess with the lock system and try to override it. For weeks after, it felt like I was being observed. I moved my desk away from the front window. I put blackout curtains in the living room. I even started doing my work at coffee shops instead of at home, just to feel surrounded by people. Friends told me I was overreacting, that it was just a glitch with a smart device. But they didn't hear the door vibrate. They didn't see the boot prints. They didn't read the login attempt that came from just down the street. I still live in that house, but I don't trust it the same way anymore. I replaced the smart lock with an old-fashioned deadbolt and 3-inch screws in the strike plate. And every time my phone buzzes with a notification at night, my stomach tightens before I even look. Because if someone was willing to stand just outside, listening to me move inside my own house, then they already knew more about me than I ever wanted them to. I was 23 when this happened. Fresh out of college, trying to figure out adulthood, one piece of IKEA furniture at a time. It was October of 2020, right in the middle of that messy, half-locked down world where you weren't sure if you should be working from home or risking your health just to buy groceries. I had just moved into a rental house in Asheville, North Carolina. It wasn't much, but after years of roommates, I wanted 4 walls that belonged to me alone. The place was small, with creaky hardwood floors and peeling paint on the porch, but it had character. And most importantly, it was cheap. Boxes were still stacked against the living room wall, half unpacked. My bed frame hadn't even been put together yet. I was sleeping with a mattress on the floor. I liked the quiet. The only sounds at night were crickets in the weeds out back and from time to time a car passing down the main road. The first odd thing happened about a week after I moved in. I just finished shoving down some late-night takeout, scrolling through my phone when there was a knock at the door. It was already dark, so I hesitated before answering. When I finally cracked it open, a woman stood on the porch. Mid-40s maybe, shoulder-length hair tucked behind her ears. She smiled in this overly casual way that made me uneasy right away. "Hi," she said. "I used to live here. Mind if I come in and take a look around?" The way she asked was strange, like she already expected me to say yes. I laughed nervously, trying to play it cool. Sorry. I just moved in. Place is kind of a disaster right now." She watched me, studying me in a way that felt a little too long. Then she shrugged. "No problem. I just thought I'd see what's changed." She walked away without another word, not toward a car, just around the corner of the block. I stood there for a while, confused. People get nostalgic about old homes, sure, but who goes knocking on strangers' doors at night asking to look inside? I tried to ignore it, though it stayed in the back of my mind. That night, I made sure the deadbolt was locked before heading to bed. The second odd detail came the next evening. I was brushing my teeth when I thought I heard movement upstairs, just a soft creak like a footstep across wood. I reminded myself the house was old. Every gust of wind made something shift. But then I remembered I didn't have an upstairs. Technically, there was an attic, but it was crawl space sized, not meant for living. The access hatch was in the hallway ceiling, sealed with a stiff pull cord. I'd never even tugged it down. I went still, toothbrush in my mouth, listening. Another faint shuffle, then silence. My body tensed instinctively, but I told myself it had to be a raccoon or squirrel nesting. Asheville has plenty of them. Still, I didn't sleep much that night. Every time the AC kicked on, I thought I heard something above me. The next morning, I called the landlord. He sounded annoyed. "Place has been empty for months before you. If something's up there, it's critters. I'll send pest control next week." I didn't mention the woman at the door. In the following days, life kept moving. Cheap instant coffee in the morning, long hours working remote, unpacking in bursts. But the feeling that I wasn't truly alone never really left. The woman came back the next day. Broad daylight this time. She knocked with that same calm smile as before. "I didn't mean to bother you the other night," she said. "I just lived here a long time, had some good memories. Thought I'd stop by again. I didn't even realize I'd stopped breathing." I lied. "Sorry, I'm busy right now." She looked over my shoulder into the house, looking to the boxes like she was cataloging what I'd unpacked. Then she smiled again and walked away. That night, footsteps again. This time, louder. Definite pacing above the ceiling. I called 911, whispering into the phone, "Someone's in my attic." They searched the attic thoroughly. What they found made me sick. Bedding tucked between beams, food wrappers, even a half-empty water jug, and a women's blouse. Someone, probably a woman, had been living up there. They didn't catch anyone that night. Whoever it was had slipped out, maybe when they heard me calling. The officers told me it was probably a transient who'd found the access point before I moved in. They suggested new locks, more lighting, and left it at that. I couldn't stay. Every creak of the house set me on edge. I packed what I could into my car and crashed on a friend's couch until I could break the lease. Before I left for good, I replaced the locks myself, every single one. To this day, I can't move into a new place without changing every lock before the first night. If these stories made you realize the real horror is being unsafe in your own home, smash that like button, hit subscribe so you never miss the next scare, and tell me how you'd have handled it. And if you think open farmland is safer than suburbia, you're about to change your mind. Click now to watch 4 disturbing farm horror stories, because wide open spaces don't always mean freedom. Sometimes they mean no one can hear you scream. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.